The Bridge by Martin Wilsey. "I don't know, Swan," Briggs said as she lowered her binoculars. "It looks pretty quiet to me. There are 2 or 3 shamblers around the mouth of the railroad tunnel." 2 or 3 we can handle," Swan whispered out of habit as he fingered the handle of his katana. "But do you remember that tunnel in Westport? How could I forget that shitstorm? I miss those mountain bikes. They could haul ass," she said as she slowly slid back down the embankment on her belly. She quietly drew her saber as she got to her feet. "There's a bike shop just on the other side of the train trestle in Harper's Ferry. If we're lucky, it won't be empty," Swan said as he started to creep. "We'll follow the C&O towpath along the Potomac here and bypass that tunnel. It will loop around to the bridge." The two moved along in the silence of experience. All their gear was stowed and padded for stealth. When they rounded the bend and saw 2 of the undead on the towpath ahead, they didn't miss a beat. Without even breaking pace, they decapitated them both. One was a woman in a filthy yellow sundress, incongruous in the cool autumn air of late October. The other was a man in a state of long decay and desiccation. As always, Briggs quickly and efficiently searched the bodies as Swan watched for threats. The woman had a purse still hanging across her shoulder diagonally. Briggs dumped it out and discarded everything except a full tube of chapstick and a quality fingernail clipper. The man's pockets were empty, but he was wearing a policeman's gun belt. The holster was open and empty, but the belt had a single .357 Magnum round still secured in it. Briggs drew it out like it was made of glass or gold and held it up to the light to examine it. When her eyes shifted to Swan, his smile was wide. "3," was all he said as she stood and drew her stainless steel Ruger SP-101 from its holster and expertly opened the drum. It contained 2 rounds. This edition made 3. Briggs reholstered as they began to move. "Don't say it," she whispered. "Say what?" "You always say it. Save the last 2 for us." "I don't always say it," Swan denied. "When it comes to my .357, you do." Briggs shook her head. "We each have 12 rounds in our ARs, and you still have like 50 rounds of 9mm for your Glock." "I don't always say it," Swan repeated. Briggs fell silent then, because the train trestle bridge came into view. "Swan, look." In the center of the bridge there were 4 train cars about 300 feet from each end of the bridge. Briggs looked through her binoculars. There were 2 tankers of some kind, a passenger car and a freight car. "Looks like we can get across. We should get moving. We need to find a place to bed down before dark," she said, and Swan nodded. "Damn it," Swan cursed quietly. "There used to be stairs that went up to the trestle here for the Appalachian Trail crossing." They looked up farther. "We'll go up to the tracks by this end of the tunnel and double back." Swan led the way, and as they moved, the wind picked up. Autumn leaves were filling the air as the breeze turned into a constant wind. They emerged onto the tracks before they realized that not all the sound was from the rustling leaves. They were only a dozen yards from the gaping maw of the tunnel when the zombies began to emerge. First a few, then a dozen, then suddenly hundreds. They didn't wait to count. They moved carefully so they didn't stumble on the railroad ties. On the bridge, the 8-inch gaps between the railroad ties had nothing but air below. These gaps forced them to be careful but drastically slowed the hungry horde behind them. The front line would trip and fall over and over again. The ones too slow to rise would be overrun and crushed into the path. A few 100 feet onto the bridge, someone had nailed plywood onto the ties between the rails, allowing them to move fast, until they saw the words spray-painted onto the bridge, "Warning, trap ahead." They came to a section where 2 sheets of plywood were painted with faded orange spray paint outlining the edges. In the center it said, "Trap, don't step here." They could see on the outside of the rails that the ties were gone there as well. The rails had "Safe, safe, 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 safe" written along the tops. A sign to the side said, "Use the rope." There was a rope hanging down from high above on the trestle, tied off loosely near their feet. Briggs lifted the rope. Behind them they could hear feet now on the plywood coming their way. "Go," was all Swan said as he turned toward the zombies moving toward them. With the help of the rope to stabilize her, she moved quickly across the rail like a balance beam. Swan only had to dispatch 1 zombie before he turned and began across the rail without the rope. Briggs swung him the rope just as the first zombie set foot on the trap. As he slid through the trap door like a chute, he got a hand on Swan's ankle and almost dragged him off the rail just as he got a hand on the rope. Like lemmings, dozens of zombies fell to the shallow river far below. The trapdoor was counterbalanced and reset whenever another zombie went through it. Swan and Briggs stood there like bait as they fell, one after another, to the river below, their bodies drifting away in the strong current of the shallow rapids. After about 15 minutes, all the zombies that were still able to move had fallen into the trap. "That's brilliant," Briggs said as the trapdoor reset for the last time. "It's quiet. It resets automatically without power. Brilliant." "I bet there's another one at the far end," Swan said. "Look at this." He drew away a blue tarp. Underneath was a wide dolly made to roll along the rails. There were about 25 cases of canned food under the tarp. This would roll right over that trap with supplies. "Come on," Briggs said. "Let's go find this genius." The freight car was closest to them. The sliding door was slightly ajar, and they peeked in as they walked by. More dusty cases of canned food filled half the car. The passenger car was next in line, but the stairs on this end had been blocked with corrugated metal panels. It looked like an enclosed passage had been established into the freight car on this end. Beyond the passage car, the first tanker car was for water. Above, a large inverted pyramid-shaped canopy hanging upside down from the train trestle functioned as a huge rain catchment system. "Swan, this last tanker is propane," Briggs said, "and there's another one of the 12-feet-long cargo dollies under that tarp. And bikes." There was a lean-to-style tarp up over a rack with a dozen or so bikes. "I think we're going to stay here tonight," Swan said. The passenger cars had curtains drawn all along both sides, and no easy and obvious ways to enter. They went back to the freight car and slid the door open enough to climb up. It was dark inside. Cases of supplies filled most of the end toward the passenger car, including tools and 55-gallon drums of fuel. An arched door had been cut into the end of the freight car with a chainsaw. The entrance to the passenger car was just beyond. They both held their AR-15s at ready. The door slid easily open and revealed a spotless and organized club car. Closest to the door were bathrooms to both left and right marked ladies and gents in Art Deco brass. There was a bar next with a large selection of booze. Bookcases in the area opposite the bar were well stocked with canned goods of all kinds. There were cafe tables and chairs, sofas, and overstuffed leather recliners, as well as booths along the same side as the bar. There was another door at the other end about 40 feet away. They opened it with rifles ready. Swan got hit unprepared by a stench. "What the fuck is that?" Briggs gasped as she buried her face in her elbow, still looking straight ahead. "I've gotten used to smelling rotten zombies, but what the hell could that be?" Swan said. There was a bed at the far end of the room. From it came a quiet, raspy voice. "That would be me." "My name is Harry Danton," he whispered. The smell was a man lying in bed, lying in his own shit and piss, but that was not the worst of it. A massive leg wound had gone septic. Rancid pus soaked the mattress. Some kind of flesh-eating virus had opened and blackened the injury, exposing the man's femur. It was full of flies and maggots. Gallon water jugs and various food cans littered the floor around the bed. "Be careful when you go in the bathroom. Martha is in there, and she is turned," he whispered weakly. "I think she killed herself." Briggs pushed the door to the bathroom open with the point of her sword. A different, more familiar smell flowed out. Martha was there, hanging from a noose made from an extension cord. Without pausing, Briggs stabbed through her eye socket and out the back of her cranium. Her thrashing stopped. "She felt guilty for stabbing my leg," Henry said. "It was an accident. Her machete was covered in gore." Briggs looked at his ankle tied to the bedpost. It was a beautiful Victorian four-poster bed. The room was lovely in its old-world style. Swan was busy opening windows. "I couldn't do it while I was strong enough." His hand patted a Beretta 9mm. "I'm a coward, plus the whole Catholic thing. Asking Martha to help was the last straw for her." After a long pause, so he could catch his breath past the pain, "Can you send us to the river together, please?" Swan picked up the Beretta and checked the load. "I'm sorry this happened to you. Did you build all this?" Henry just nodded slightly, his eyes drooping. "We'll take care of everything," Briggs said in her kindest voice. His eyes slid shut, and Briggs severed the top of his head with a single sword strike on the bridge of his nose. They did as Harry Denton wished. He and his wife Martha were laid to rest together on the soiled mattress, and with the help of the cargo dolly, Swan was able to say a few words over them at the trap door. "We're going to rename this the Denton Bridge. Thank you, Henry. We will pay it forward." With those words, they tipped the mattress and the bodies onto Henry's trap. The water was deeper at the Harper's Ferry end. Their bodies disappeared into the green water straight away. Screams made them look away, and they saw below in Harper's Ferry a teenage boy and girl running out of an alley with several dozen zombies in hot pursuit. They were wearing red matching t-shirts that said Thing 1 and Thing 2. They must have been in one of the tourist shops. They had no gear, no backpacks, and looked like they had been caught unaware. "Some of those are fresh and can still move pretty fast," Swan said as he raised his scope to his eye and waited. "Looks like some of their pals turned without notice." Briggs put 2 fingers in her mouth and whistled an amazingly loud blast. The tiring teens saw them and began running their way. Swan held his fire until one zombie got too close to the panicked girl and he shot. The zombie dropped, tripping the 3 directly behind it. The crowd of zombies increased to about 50 by the time the teens got to the trap. "It's a trap door. Hold on to this." There were 2 ropes at this end of the bridge. "Use the rail like a balance beam." The girl just grabbed the rope on the run and swung the distance as rotting arms stretched out for her. They watched out of breath as the entire horde plummeted to the river below. "I'm Swan. This is Briggs." Swan reached out his hand to shake. She ignored the outstretched hand and hugged him around the waist. "Are you guys hungry? I was about to make dinner." "Ever watch Star Trek?" Briggs smiled. The boy looked up. "Didn't anyone ever tell you what happens to red shirts?" Briggs smiled. The kids were younger than they first appeared. Briggs and Swan held each one as they sobbed. It felt like a start to something. This has been The Bridge by Martin Wilsey, a Whispers of the Apoc short story. Narrated by David McCord. Audio and print copyright by Tannhauser Press, all rights reserved.